How we doing today, guys? Sam here at Anglers, and I am a guest on this week's Freshwater Mondays. We got some really exciting stuff here in front of us. As we transition into the fall months, we start to fish a lot of bait fish profile stuff. And it's pretty hard to forget about some of your swimming baits, like the swim baits, and then the swim jigs too. So you can fish swim baits on a multiple different tactics here. We're going to talk about those when you would want to fish one over the other. And then the swim jig, which is a super popular lure, especially on the Potomac. It's one of the most popular lures, but also could be used in all sorts of different applications, whether you're fishing the ponds, some of the upper rivers here on the bay, some of those mill ponds. It's a really versatile bait.
Some of the reservoirs and all that. But yeah, let's start with, I guess, one of the, like you just said, mentioned one of the most famous ones, and that's a swim jig. So of course we got a swim jig there. They come in different weights, colors, sizes. Obviously match the hatch right to whatever you're fishing. What would you say the two most popular colors will be around here right now?
White and black and blue.
Yeah, and then of course, you know, you can match that up with a couple different trailers that we have here. You could put a little crawl imitation trailer on there. You know, some different shape profiles. We got some that's a little slim and some that's a little bit bigger, just to add some bulk to it. And you can run that through cover pretty well, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes through basically anything you want to put a swim jig in. They just come right out of it. Whether that be grass, wood, rocks. They're really great at knocking and hung up. So we have a couple different swim jigs here in front of you. These are the new ones that we just got in from Jackal. Those are really good looking baits there. A little bit more traditional looking swim jig would be this little Smitty here. The cool thing about these is they're both hand tied skirts, which is great because you don't have to worry about skirts falling out, and the colors, they spread out the skirt a lot more. And the cool thing also about a hand-tied skirt is it's tighter around the shank of the jig. What that does is it puts more flare out because it's
more action.
Yeah, the rubber is more condensed, so it has more of a pulsating action to it. And pulsating action is really the most important thing when we're fishing a swim jig, because if I'm fishing just a regular jig, I have my main movement, the tail going and kicking back and forth. I can get that same movement with a jig head or an underspin or all sorts of stuff like that. But what I get with the swim jig is secondary movement. Not only do I have a tail kick or a undulation from the crawl, I also have that skirt moving, which adds that secondary movement. Just makes things look a little bit more realistic, and it's going to bulk up the profile. So in the fall months, when we have a little bit bigger bait in the areas, I like to have a swim jig a lot of times, because if I'm fishing in heavy cover, I still want a bulky presentation because we're looking for bigger bites. A good tip for you to look for trailers for swim jigs to get that pulsating action is find something that has not only kick but has roll to it too. You're going to start to see that on baits like the Kitex. Another one that we didn't bring over here that we sell are the Gamblers. They have a lot of wobble and kick. What that does is that wobble is going to make that skirt undulate, which we want. Another thing you can do is trim up the skirt. I always recommend that. At least trim it to the back here. And you don't have to have a straight cut skirt like this. A lot of times having shorter and longer ones will help that bait undulate even more and move. So in that same idea though, we're not always fishing in structure. Sometimes we're fishing on those secondary ledges. So that's when we're going to start using some of the other baits.
For example, if you're fishing a lot of these places like Loch Raven, Philadelphia, Rocky Gorge, or more open water, harsh structure, or just pretty much like open water, deeper water structure, having that open hook jig will work a little bit better since you're not fighting any cover, and hook sets are going to be a little bit better with that. Of course, there's different weights, hook sizes, hook styles on there. I know some will have like super thick hooks on them, some will have more light wire hooks, so there's a lot of stuff out there. And of course you can put any of these with that, with those jigs. And something that kind of goes hand to hand with that is the underspin, right, Sammy?
Yeah, the underspin to me is the same situation I would fish an open hook jig head, but what I get with that is that extra blade. And sometimes it really doesn't matter. If I'm fishing a bunch of open water and there's not really much bait around, it's perfect because I can just look like another bait fish. But if I'm fishing on really schooled up fish, it looks different. It gives something out of that school that looks out of the ordinary. A 3.8 Kitech on a jig head looks like any little small gizzard shad running through the water. That's all it looks like. But when you add that blade to it, now I have a secondary action again, like we talked about over here, that stands out from the crowd. And you don't have to have a jig head just a bare jig head, a lot of times, I know you are a huge proponent of the underspin. Another thing to keep in mind with the underspins, though, is you have that blade there, which is a good thing and a bad thing. You're going to need a heavier weight with an underspin than you would with a traditional jig head, because that underspin, with that spinning blade, it's going to create rise on the bait.
Correct.
So you want to step up on the weight there. Another good thing about these is you don't have to, this is, heavier cover stuff. It's really nice to have that on a beefier bait casting outfit, medium heavy action rod. With these baits, we can get away with fishing them on spinning gear
rods,
too,
yep.
which is important because not a lot of you guys are going to have a rod for every tactic.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to have something I can fish on a spinning rod.
And just a little tip that it's kind of like odd, but one thing I used to do, or still do, honestly, like you said, using some of those lighter weight underspins, and sometimes that extra wobble in the back will create more of that lift too. I don't know if it really makes a big difference, but I personally think it does just enough to keep it down a little bit more. I'll actually flip the tail. So instead of being downwards, rigging it up that way, I'll flip it up, and that creates a little bit less of that lift. Helps to keep it down a little more. I mean, it's something to try out.
Yeah,
Maybe a little different
absolutely.
action, something, a little profile, or different kick to it. But yeah, keep that in mind.
If you're fishing in some of the small ponds, though, you can't always fish an exposed hook with an underspin.
Correct.
A lot of times you're going to need a weedless option. That one there is by the BKK. Those are really beefy hooks, but they're as beefy as they are. They have the slick coating on them. They call it Titan Driver because it's titanium coated, which has a really slick feel to it. So even though black nickel, you feel a black nickel hook, it's very slick. But those are even slicker, which promotes better hook sets. So even
Right.
though it's a thicker hook, I can still fish it on a little bit lighter gear because I have that extra slide with it.
And all of this will apply to snakeheads too. I mean, this is like prime example of how to run your swim baits out there and where to use what for most of these snakeheads, since most of us are throwing a paddle tail like probably 70% of the time nowadays. And remember, it's just based on what area, what kind of structure you're fishing, and you can apply all of this to that.
Another thing I really like about swim jigs, whether I'm bass fishing or snakehead fishing in general, if it's in the water, I'm fishing it right. A lot of other baits are very precise. You have to fish it this way and that way. But if I have a swim bait in the water, and as long as I'm moving the rod, that tail is kicking. At least I
Right.
have something going on. So it's really great. There's not much of a learning curve to fishing these baits. You rig the baits on the jig head and you cast and wind a lot
Correct.
of the time.
It's pretty simple stuff.
It is simple. Of course, you can get really intricate with it. You can do 3 turns and then a pause, all sorts of stuff like that. I'm not a big snakehead fisherman like you are, but I would say 90% of the snakehead I've caught came on swim jigs.
Oh yeah, I always tell that to people. What's one of the most consistent things or patterns I guess we have on snakeheads is that they love paddle tail.
Yeah.
And that's the easiest thing. Most people make the mistake to use a frog 90% of the time they're fishing out there, when they realize that they should have been throwing something like this, a subsurface swim bait, that 90% of the time, and their catch ratio would have gone up a little more.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely check them out. We got plenty of different colors, different style jigs and everything. Anything else you want to add there, Sammy?
So these are 1/4 ounce, which a lot of times we're snakehead fishing. We're in pretty shallow water, so we're going to get away with those lighter weights. 3/8 ounce is probably the most versatile size, though. You can fish for snakehead with them, but you really got to keep your rod tip up. But also, most of what we're doing with bass fishing, we're in a touch deeper water, only a couple more feet, but 3/8 ounce is more of a go-to size there. When it comes to just the bare jig head weight, you can go 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounces. We don't have much drag again, so we can get away with some lighter weights.
Right.
But usually, I would say minimum of a 3/8 ounce on the underspins, just because of how tough it is to keep those down in the water column.
All right, guys. Well, that's all we got today for your Freshwater Monday. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.